After spending $6,000 to host a surprise 50th anniversary for my parents, I walked into the hall to find my name scratched off the invitations. My aunt pulled me aside and whispered, "They didn't want you embarrassing them." I stood frozen as they introduced my brother as their only real achievement. A year later, when they lost everything, I was the only one who could help, and I walked away without a word. I didn't grow up thinking my parents hated me. It was more like they forgot I existed. I was the quiet kid. The one who got decent grades but not amazing ones. The one who didn't make varsity, didn't win any awards, didn't give them grandkids before 40. My brother Brian was the opposite. He walked into a room and people noticed. Football team captain. Homecoming king. Dean's list. He married a woman just as polished as he was. They lived in Westport and threw brunches where everyone drank mimosas and talked about house renovations. Me? I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Norwalk, worked in IT, fixed printers, answered tickets. Not exciting. But it paid the bills. And when Mom and Dad's 50th anniversary came around, I figured I'd finally do something that would make them see me. Not love me. Just see me. I planned everything. They didn't even know. It was going to be a surprise. I contacted people they hadn't spoken to in decades. I booked a hall in Stamford with space for 120 guests. A DJ, full catering, gold-dipped centerpieces. The whole theme was golden years. I even found an old cassette of their wedding vows, had it converted to digital so I could play it at the party. I put everything I had into that night. Emotionally, financially, mentally. I worked overtime to cover the costs. Skipped meals. Delayed car repairs. I was down to my last $300 when the event came. I didn't invite anyone for me. No coworkers, no friends. This wasn't about me. It was for them. And then came the moment that changed everything. I arrived early to make sure things were running smoothly. Guests were starting to show up. I walked in, proud of what I'd pulled off, and then I saw the invitations on the welcome table. My heart dropped. The original design said, "Hosted with love by their son, Michael." Now, each one had a thick black line across my name. Every single one. It wasn't a printing error. Someone had taken a marker and scratched it out. Deliberately. I thought it was a prank at first. Some kind of mix-up. I asked the woman at the welcome table. She just looked awkward and shrugged. Said she was handed them that way by the family. That's when my Aunt Diane pulled me aside. She looked pale, like she didn't want to be part of this. She said, "Michael, they told the planner to take your name off. Said they didn't want you listed. Your dad was worried it would embarrass them." I asked her, "Embarrass them how?" She just looked away. I stood there, frozen. Couldn't breathe right. Like I'd been slapped. Then the music started and the DJ shouted, "Let's give it up for 50 years of love, Carol and David, and their one true pride, their son Brian." That was it. The final twist of the knife. Brian came in with Amy, wearing some expensive tailored suit. Their kids were in matching outfits, carrying balloons that said, #OneFamily. I watched from the side. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just detached. My dad raised his glass and said, "We've had a great life. But our proudest legacy is sitting right there, Brian, our biggest success. Our only real achievement." People clapped. My mom kissed him on the cheek. I stood 10 feet away, invisible. I left before the speeches ended. Didn't stay for the slideshow. Didn't get to play their wedding vows. I paid for it all, but I wasn't even allowed to exist. That night, I didn't sleep. For weeks, I replayed it in my head. Kept wondering if I was the problem. If maybe I was an embarrassment. I had nothing to show for my life, really. No wife. No kids. A used car, a rented apartment. Nothing like Brian. But then something inside me snapped. I stopped texting. Stopped reaching out. When my mom sent a thank you email with no mention of what they'd done, I didn't respond. They never apologized. Not once. It was like they expected me to eat it and move on. Like I should have known my place. So I made a decision. I was done. It started unraveling for them 6 months later. Dad's real estate investment went under. He'd put nearly everything into a beachfront development that never got off the ground. Lawsuits, debt collectors, the works. Their retirement fund vanished. Around the same time, Mom had a stroke. Mild, but it messed up her right side. She couldn't drive anymore. Needed help getting around. They sold the house. Moved in with Brian. Didn't last long. Amy hated it. She thought they were too needy. The kids complained. Dad and Brian argued about bills. After 3 months, Brian dropped them off at a hotel and told them they needed space. That's when the calls started. Voicemails. Emails. Aunt Diane again. They need help. They've got nowhere else to go. And sure, I could have helped. By then I'd gotten a better job. Made enough to support them. I even had a spare room. But I remembered what they said. What they did. So I met them at a diner. Let them explain. Let them beg. And when they asked if I'd take them in, I stood up, looked them dead in the eye, and said, "You erased me. Remember?" Then I walked out. After I walked out of that diner, I didn't feel better. I thought I would. I thought it'd feel like some kind of victory. Like I'd finally evened the score. But all I felt was cold. For weeks after, I kept checking my phone, waiting for another message, another voicemail, something. But they went quiet. Not a word. Not from them. Not from Brian. Not even Aunt Diane. Then, out of nowhere, I got a letter. An actual, handwritten letter. From my father. It was short. Barely a paragraph. Said they understood my decision. That they weren't proud of how things had gone. That they were handling it on their own. No apology. Just a note to say they wouldn't bother me anymore. I tore it in half and threw it out. But it stuck with me. Because that's the thing about cutting people off, it sounds clean, but it never is. I started having dreams. Vivid ones. Of that party. Of Brian giving the toast. Of me screaming in the middle of the hall, shoving the cake over. I'd wake up sweating, angry, confused. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been used and then tossed out when they didn't need me anymore. Then one day, I ran into Amy. I was at the pharmacy, picking up a prescription. She was 2 aisles over. We locked eyes. She walked over, looking nervous. "Michael," she said. "Can we talk for a second?" I didn't want to, but something in her face made me stay. She sighed. I didn't agree with what they did. Not at that party. I told Brian it was wrong. But he said, "Your parents didn't want to upset the guests. That it would have made them look bad." I stared at her. "You mean it would have made me look bad? Like I didn't belong?" She hesitated. They were trying to keep things polished. You know how they are. I laughed once. A bitter sound. "Where are they now?" I asked. Her face shifted. "An assisted living place out in Bridgeport. It's not great. They're sharing a room. Medicaid's covering most of it, but... She swallowed. "Your dad's getting worse. He doesn't recognize people sometimes. And your mom, she's not taking it well." I nodded. She leaned in. "Brian's barely involved. He visits maybe once every 2 months." I nodded again. Then I turned and walked away. A week later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was a woman named Sharon, a nurse at the facility. She said my mother had been asking for me. Said she cried in her room after visiting hours, calling my name. I sat in my car for hours listening to that message on repeat. Then I made a decision. Not the one they wanted. I didn't go visit. But I did something else. I called Brian. He didn't answer the first time. Or the second. On the third try, he finally picked up. His voice was clipped, like I was wasting his time. What do you want? I kept it simple. They're your legacy now. Handle it. He scoffed. Oh, what, you suddenly care? No, I said. But I want you to live with it. Then I hung up. But here's the twist I didn't see coming. 3 days later, Aunt Diane called. Said Brian wasn't answering anyone now. He'd packed up, taken his family, and moved to Austin without telling anyone. Left no forwarding address. His phone was disconnected. The golden boy vanished. That's when the calls started again from the care facility, from social workers, even from a local church group that had been bringing my parents food. And that's when the final piece dropped. They'd listed me as their next of kin. Legally, financially, I was the one on paper. Brian had taken his name off everything months ago. The state was preparing to take full custody over their affairs. They were about to be moved into a public facility overcrowded, underfunded, and understaffed. I had the power to stop it. I didn't. I let it happen. It was almost quiet after that. The facility stopped calling. Aunt Diane stopped reaching out. It was like the whole situation disappeared overnight, like I'd imagined it all. I focused on work. Took longer hours. Spent weekends hiking, trying to get out of my own head. But every time I passed through Bridgeport on the way to anywhere else, something twisted in my gut. Then one day, I got a certified letter. It was from a lawyer. Not for a lawsuit, for an estate matter. Apparently, even after everything, my father had left behind a will. And I was in it. It wasn't much, just a few remaining possessions. A watch, some old letters, a box of photos, and one unexpected item, a sealed envelope marked, "For Michael." Only him. I picked it up at the office in person. The attorney didn't know what it said. Just told me it was handwritten by my father 6 months before he died. I took it home and let it sit on my kitchen table for 2 days. When I finally opened it, the first thing I saw was the handwriting, sharp, almost angry. It read, "Michael, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I won't pretend I deserve forgiveness. I don't. I failed you. We made you invisible because we didn't understand you. Because you weren't what we expected. But that doesn't mean you weren't worth loving. You paid for that party. I know. I found the receipts in your mother's drawer. She hid them from me. She thought it would shame me. You showed up. We didn't. I can't change what I did. But maybe I can still do something. Look in the bottom of the box." Dad, I pushed aside the stack of old photos and found a small envelope taped to the bottom of the box. Inside it, a key. And a folded note. The note had an address. It was a storage unit in Norwalk. Paid up for 10 years in advance. I drove there that night. It was raining. Cold. The place looked half abandoned. The manager let me in. Inside the unit was a single metal cabinet. Inside the cabinet were thousands of dollars in savings bonds. Old. From the 90s. My name was on them. Dozens of them. And a letter from the bank confirming they were gifted to me when I was a kid. Meant to mature by the time I turned 30. But I'd never seen them. Never been told about them. Because they'd never been handed over. They'd been forgotten. Or hidden. My stomach turned. I checked the issue dates. My grandparents had bought them for me. Not Brian, just me. I took them home. Counted the value. It was over $80,000. 80 grand that had been mine since I was a kid. Left untouched in a forgotten cabinet. While I struggled to pay for their party. While I skipped dinners. While I maxed out credit cards to make them feel celebrated. I sat on the floor of my apartment and laughed until my chest hurt. The golden boy got the spotlight. I got the secret. That same week, I got a call from the state. They wanted to know if I'd come in to discuss long-term guardianship of my mother. She was now fully dependent. Incontinent. Slipping in and out of coherence. I asked them if she still remembered me. The woman on the phone paused, then said gently, "She calls out for a Michael sometimes. But it's hard to know if she means you." I said, "Tell her he's gone." Then I hung up. 3 months later, I got another call. This one came from a social worker named Helena. She sounded young. Tired. She told me my mother had taken a bad fall. Broke her hip. They didn't have enough staff that night. She was on the floor for hours before anyone found her. They'd taken her to the hospital in Bridgeport. She was stable, but fading. Not much time left, they said. She asked if I wanted to come say goodbye. I said no. She paused. "Are you sure?" I said, "Let her say goodbye to Brian. He's the one they were proud of." Then I hung up for the last time. I didn't cry. A week later, I got a plain white envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a memorial card from the funeral home. It had my mother's name and the date she died. A Bible verse printed under her photo. I stared at it for a long time. And then I threw it away. No one told me there'd be a service. No one invited me. But that made sense. I wasn't invited when they celebrated their lives, either. Why start now? A few months after that, I took the savings bonds, the ones meant for me, and cashed them in. I moved out of Norwalk. Got a small house upstate with a fenced-in yard and a rescue dog named Buddy. It's quiet here. Peaceful. I don't talk to anyone from that side of the family anymore. Not Aunt Diane. Not the cousins. Not even Brian, though I did hear through an old coworker that he ended up divorced. Amy took the kids and moved back to Westport. He's somewhere in Austin, working a job beneath his pay grade, living alone in a one-bedroom apartment. The golden boy lost his shine. As for me, I'm still not a success, if you ask the world. I'm not rich. I'm not famous. I don't have a family of my own. But I sleep at night. I live on my terms. And I stopped begging people to see me. I used to think revenge meant yelling or slamming doors or screaming in someone's face. But real revenge? It's silence. It's watching the people who wrote you off realize they can't rewrite the ending. And knowing that when they finally reached for you, the only one who could have saved them, you walked away without a word. Because you remembered. And they finally had to live with the version of the story where you didn't show up. The version where you stopped trying to earn a seat at the table. The version where you let them sit with the silence they created. Forever.